So I don't know Ohio that intimately, but as far as I can tell, Cedar Point is the coolest place in the world because they have all the roller coasters, right? Am I just a little kid, or does everybody still like roller coasters? Hey, I'm Austin, and if you're watching a 240 video, it's all about helping teachers like you get into the classroom. This video is going to help you prepare for the subtest number 2 of the OAE Elementary Education Exam. That's test code 019. Now, you might already know this, but the OAE Elementary Education Exam is split into 2 subtests. Subtest 1 is ELA and Social Studies, and subtest 2, what we're discussing today, includes mathematics, science, and the arts, health, and fitness. Each subtest contains about 75 multiple choice questions. As usual, we're going to cover 3 things here: what's on the test and how to prep for it, the most likely concepts that you're going to need to know for the test, and we're going to look at a few practice questions towards the end. Now, who's ready for subtest 2? That sounds like you. Now, like we saw before, the OAE Elementary Education Subtest number 2 is made up of 3 content domains. It's math, it's science, and there's a group that includes health, arts, and fitness. So math takes up the biggest chunk here. That's going to be about 50% of the exam. Science is another 38%, and then art, health, and fitness counts for only about 12% of the whole exam. Now, each one of these domains has competencies under it. These competencies provide more information about what's going to show up on your exam. I've said it before and I'll say it again. These competencies can look exactly like legalese, but that's why I'm here. We want to clear that up. We'll go over a key concept from each competency, and these are going to be essential to know for your exam. All right, we'll start with the biggest and hairiest domain in math. The first competency in math is numeration, number sense, and mathematical operations. This competency covers how students represent and combine numbers. One of the most important things to know for this competency is place value. That means you'll need to understand a place value chart like this one, and the value each digit within a larger number holds. So let's dig into that. For example, the digit 7 appears in each of these 3 numbers, but it has a different value in each. In 5,237, 7 is in the ones place, so it has just a value of 7. In 7,852, 7 is in the thousands place and has a value of 7,000. In 82 and 47 thousandths, 7 is in the thousands place and has a little tiny value of 0.007. Ooh, and here's a handy tip. Pay super close attention to the ending of these words. It can be really easy to make a mistake between thousands and thousandths if you're not careful. You'll also probably be asked to take decimals and turn them into fractions, or vice versa. And they can get extra fancy and even throw in some percent conversions for you too. Would you want any help with any of that? The 240 Study Guide has your back. Would you want maybe just a little sneak peek? Yeah, I thought so. Okay, here's a handy graphic from the study guide that helps you convert between fractions, decimals, and percents. Have a fraction but need a percent? Easy enough. Divide the top number by the bottom, multiply that by 100, and add yourself a percent sign. Done and done. One competency down, let's move on to competency number 2. Competency 2 is mathematical reasoning and problem solving, communication and representation, and data analysis. That is a lot wrapped up into one competency. Each of these topics could be an entire chapter in a math book. So for now, join me in focusing on that data part. You'll likely be given data in a table or chart and asked to interpret it. Or you might be asked to do something with the data. So for example, you might be asked to work with the measures of central tendency. They tend to make up a central part of this test. Tough room, all right. If given a data set, you'll need to know how to calculate the mean, median, mode, and range. Sound familiar? Let's take a look at how these are explained in our study guide.
5 students have their heights measured. The data set is 158, 155, 164, 155, and 168 centimeters. We want to find the mean, median, mode, and range of this data set. First, let's rearrange the data to go from least to greatest. We'll get 155, 155, 158, 164, and 168. To calculate the mean, first add these numbers together to get a total of 800. Then divide the result by the number of students measured, which is 5. This gives us a calculated mean of 160. The median is the middle number in our organized data set, which is 158. The mode is the most frequent number, which here is 155. And our range is equal to 168, the highest number, minus 155, the smallest, which equals 13.
Are you starting to feel like these skills are in your range? Nothing? No, that's fine. No, I'm not here to play. I'm all about the business too. No joking around. Let's move on to competency number 3. The third competency in domain 1 is patterns, algebra, and functions. This covers recognizing patterns in number sequences and using your understanding of patterns to make predictions. You'll also need to recognize functions and use algebra to solve some real-world problems. Since there are 2 mentions of patterns in the descriptors for this competency, let's focus in there. Now, another math-specific name for a pattern is a sequence. A sequence is a list of numbers, shapes, or even symbols that go in a specific order. So in general, we're looking at 3 types of sequences here. First up, you've got arithmetic sequences, and these are usually the easiest to figure out. They have a common difference between terms, meaning you're gonna add or subtract the same number every time you go from one term to the next. In this example, we add 5 to get from one term to the next each time. Then you've got geometric sequences. These are a little trickier, but you've got this. In these, you need to either multiply or divide, again by the same number each time, to go from one term to the next. In this example, we multiply by 3 each time. Finally, we have the trickiest one. And guess what? They're even called complex patterns because they're, well, complex. In a complex pattern, you're gonna have to identify 2 separate patterns. So look at this number sequence, 6, 2, 7, 3, 8, and so on. To go from 6 to 2, you have to subtract by 4. Then we go up to 7, so there we need to add 5. And then you go back and forth between those actions. Subtract 4, add 5, subtract 4, etc. But that's just one piece of this pretty big competency. To see everything that you'll need to see to study all the stuff you need to be successful, I totally recommend the 240 Study Guide. Are you ready to mosey on over to competency 4? That's the last one in math. Oh yeah, let's do it. The fourth competency, geometry and measurement, covers a basic understanding of shapes and how they relate to each other. So similar and congruent shapes and how to calculate area and perimeter, that's gonna show up here. And it covers using appropriate measuring tools and converting between measurement systems. That's also gonna be important here. There's a lot to unpack in this one too, but one thing that's definitely gonna come up is similar shapes. Shapes are similar when they have congruent angle measures and number of sides, but they're a different overall size. When shapes are similar, you can relate them to each other in order to find missing side lengths. I know you want to see an example of what I'm talking about here, right? Okay, let's head into the guide.
Let's do 2 examples together to see this even better. The 2 triangles here are similar. Let's find the length of the missing side, x. First, we'll draw the outline of a proportion, 2 equal fractions, inside of a rectangle. Label the left side of the rectangle with 2 different shapes. On the top of the rectangle, label the first fraction side A and the second fraction side B. In the first fraction, place the value of side A of each of the shapes, making sure the labels to the left correspond appropriately. In the second fraction, write the known amount of side B. Then place an X for the unknown amount. Then once again, cross-multiply and divide to solve for x.
Like what you saw? There's plenty more where that came from in the 240 Study Guide. Look at you, we finished math. Let's head right over to science. The first competency in the science portion of your exam is life science. So you're gonna need to know the characteristics and life processes of different organisms and how to classify them. You're also gonna need to know how they reproduce, what their life cycles look like, and how they interact with their environments. Okay, they're not asking for too much here, are they? Yeah, they are, okay. Anyway, let's pick apart one of these ideas so it's not so overwhelming. Here's a nice meaty one, the characteristics of organisms. Let's dig in specifically on adaptations, which are traits that help improve functions and better equip organisms for survival. There are 2 types of adaptations that an organism can have, structural or behavioral. Structural adaptations are physical features that help an organism survive, like a bird species that develops a different beak shape that makes it easier for them to get food, or even a coat color that helps an animal blend in with their environment. Behavior adaptations are things that organisms do naturally, usually to avoid harm, like when a skunk sprays scent for protection or a bird migrates to avoid a cold temperature. And if you need a little more help with this, stick around to the practice questions that are going to come up at the end of the video, because I just might have one that involves adaptations for us. Okay, let's keep cruising through domain 2. The next competency is kind of a double whammy. They lumped in physical science with earth and space science. So this means it covers matter, energy, and waves, and the solar system, and tectonic plates, and earth systems, and valuable resources on Earth. Whew. Okay, and look, obviously we can't cover every concept for all of this competency. It's just too broad. I mean, there's college majors dedicated to each one of these things. We will pick one that's essential to know for your exam. And remember, if you want more, if you need more, subscribe to that 240 study guide. We have everything that you'll need to know for this competency and for this exam, so you can pass your test with confidence. For now, let's get into an important movement within our solar system. I'm talking about eclipses, and I have just the video to show you. Let's take a sneak peek inside our study guide.
To keep the two clear, remember the name of the eclipse tells you what it affects. Solar eclipses have the moon in the middle and affect the way the sun looks. Think solar equals sun. Lunar eclipses have the earth in the middle and affect the way the moon looks. Think lunar equals moon.
All right, that little clip was just a glance into what we can offer. And again, we're so confident in these things that we offer a money-back guarantee. Check it out. Let's wrap up our last competency in science, competency number 7. Competency number 7 covers the nature of science, which is basically a way of grouping all the general scientific practices and the ways of thinking that you can use no matter what branch of science you're studying. So you'll need to understand and apply the scientific method, you'll collect and measure data, and you'll learn how science relates to other subjects. And you'll also need to recognize unifying themes that run between all the branches of science, like systems and the relationship between form and function. Okay, and before we let that long list become overwhelming, let's zoom in on the cornerstone of it, which is the scientific method. You want to brush up on those steps with me just a little bit? Let's check out a flowchart from our study guide that'll help us break this down. Students start by identifying a problem. Then they make observations about the problem. Next, they form a hypothesis, design and conduct an experiment, record the data they collected during the experiment, and finally, they draw conclusions. Often, scientists will use their conclusions to modify their hypothesis and design a whole new experiment. It goes on and on. Look, here's another tip for us. You're likely to see some questions on how to best implement each of these steps, not just what they are. So make sure you know how to write a proper hypothesis and how to set up an experiment. All right, we've got plenty more where that came from, but let's dig into the last domain and also the last competency. We're almost at the finish line. Arts, health, and fitness, yep, you heard me correctly, all of that is shoved into one competency. Now, I know this is kind of a hodgepodge, but let's zoom in on health for now. It's important to understand the nutrition needed to maintain a healthy body. The United States Food and Drug Administration currently uses the MyPlate dietary guideline. It's an image that shows the relative portion sizes of each type of food, and that's how we're going to teach kids to have a balanced meal. That was our very last topic from our very last domain and our very last competency. Do you know what that means? I think you do. It's practice question time. Okay, let's start back at the beginning with domain number 1, which is of course mathematics. We'll take a look at a question about place value. What is the digit in the hundreds place of the product of 63 times 31? The first step here is to actually do the math. So 63 times 31 equals 1,953. So the answer here is D. The digit that occupies the hundreds place is 9. Time for a question about converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. What percent is represented by the shaded area of the decimal square? First, we need to figure out what fraction of the figure is shaded. There are 100 total squares and 24 of them are shaded, which would give us a fraction of 24 over 100, which is of course 24%. Great, okay, let's look at measures of central tendency. The number of inches of snowfall in Selbyville is graphed in the bar chart below. What is the mean number of inches of snowfall per month from November to March? To find the mean, we need to add up all the values and divide by the number of values in the dataset. So 5 plus 7 plus 9 plus 8 plus 1, which equals 30. There are 5 data points, so 30 divided by 5 gives us 6. this is the right answer. Next up in the sequence of questions is a question of sequences. Which of the sequences below is arithmetic? An arithmetic sequence is one where the same amount is added or subtracted from each term to the next. The only one here that fits this criteria is B. The sequence has a constant difference of 4 since each term is 4 more than the preceding term, making it an arithmetic sequence. Y'all, all aboard, the next stop on the math train is similar shapes. A 6-foot tall person stands 40 feet from a tree and casts an afternoon shadow that's 10 feet long. His shadow reaches to the end of the shadow cast by the tree. Since we know the length of both shadows, we can build half of our proportion. The man's shadow is 10 feet long and the tree's shadow is 40 feet long? Wait a minute, no. Did you catch that mistake? The problem told us that both shadows end at the same place. This means that the tree's shadow is 40 feet long plus 10 feet long. That gives us 50 feet. So we can use our 10-foot shadow and our 50-foot shadow to build 1/2 of the proportion. Okay, right away, A and B can be eliminated because they don't have 10 and 50 together in a fraction. Next, we know the man is 6 feet tall, and we don't know the height of the tree yet, so let's keep that as H. Here's where it gets a little tricky. Since the man's measurements are 6 feet tall with a 10-foot shadow, those two numbers need to match up. Choice C here is best. 6 and 10 are both the denominators of their fractions. All right, let's hop off the math train and switch tracks over to science, which is domain number 2. Remember when we talked about adaptations here? Bears are warm-blooded animals that have fur and thick claws. They hibernate in the winter. What is the hibernation behavior an example of? This is definitely an adaptation, and since we're dealing with something the animal does instead of a trait the animal has, B is best. An adaptation helps an organism survive, and a bear naturally hibernating is an example of a behavior adaptation. Okay, let's keep on moving with science. This next one is going to involve physical science. How does heat from the sun travel to the earth? Right away, cross off photosynthesis. That's done by plants to create sugar. It's not even closely related. The sun warms the planet by sending heat in the form of electromagnetic waves. That means radiation is the best answer here. Okay, once more in the science competency, we're headed over to the scientific method. A student performed an experiment on 3 different types of paper towels. Each of the towels was soaked in a separate beaker, each containing 20 milliliters of water, for exactly 15 seconds. The towels were then removed. What step should be next in the procedure in order to accurately identify the paper towel that absorbed the most water? There's only one answer here that allows us to get a measurable difference in our paper towels, which is super important whenever we're conducting an experiment. Choice A is correct. To accurately compare the paper towel absorption, the amount of water remaining in each of the beakers must be measured and compared after removing the soaking paper towels. The science domain? Done and dusted. One more to go. This last question is coming at you from the health department. And don't worry, we're not grading the cleanliness of your restaurant, but if I were, I bet you'd pass with flying colors. Anyway, which of the following is a key component to living a healthy lifestyle? Adequate water, nutrition, and exercise, increasing the amount of stationary activities, reducing the amount of sleep, encouraging all citizens to engage in the same amount of exercise daily. The best answer here is A. Adequate water, nutrition, and exercise are key components of a healthy lifestyle. That's a gimme. Hey, that's it. You answered a question from every competency of this OAE subtest 2. Congratulations on hanging out with me and finishing the video. Last call, if you're watching, give us a like and a subscribe. Come on. Okay, there's still plenty more to learn, and if you want to make sure you're prepared for the OAE Elementary Education Subtest 2, take the next step, subscribe to the 240 Study Guide. It's got hours of videos, so you can watch and or listen while you're doing other things even. It's test aligned, so you know you're studying what you need to and not extra fluff, and it has hundreds of practice questions, so you know exactly when you're ready. Look, don't forget about that money-back guarantee. Click on the link below right now and get started. Work smarter, not harder.